And we're back. This is segment 3 of episode 439 of the Colombia Calling podcast. I'm here in Bogota, and my very special guest is in Sweden. I think this is the first time we've ever had someone on the line from Sweden. We've had Zambia, but not Sweden. Anyways, I'm talking to Jesica López, PhD in the making. She is Colombian, and she's an expert in sustainable land use at the Center for Environment and Climate Science, and she teaches as well at the Lund University Graduate School for 2030 policy there. But we're going to talk all about the Amazon and security and protection and land use, because it's incredibly polemic right now here in Colombia. So Jesica, welcome on the Colombia Calling podcast.
Hey, Richard. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
It's a real pleasure. Let's start with the very basics, Jesica. How did you end up in between Denmark and Sweden?
That's a good question. Well, as many Colombians abroad probably, love made me came to the other side of the Atlantic. So yes, I'm married with a Dane, and then we have kids, and the rest is just story.
So I have an idea. Is he 3 meters tall? Does he look like a Viking? as different to a Bogotano as possible.
That could be a good description. Not as many Danes Viking style, but he seems quite Danish.
Okay, very good. So you've been there a long time. I mean, it's something like 14 years.
Yes, almost 14 years now. We moved here, 2009. So. Wow. A lot of changes, a lot of different processes. And I've been living in Copenhagen, now in Sweden, in the academia, in the private sector, learning a lot about land use, sustainability, etc.
But one last question about this change in lifestyle, because I think of Colombia and I think of the alegría, and I think of where I am now, and there's ups and downs like everywhere. And I think of Scandinavia, and I think it far more organized, and but I know Scandinavians who are amazing and outgoing and talking, but the image in Colombia of a Scandinavian is going to be someone who's cold and rigid. Is this true, or just put this to sleep now?
Well, I couldn't disagree more. And I think if you have a coin, the two sides of the coin is Colombia and then the Nordics.
Yeah,
it is definitely, there are different people, but in general, Nordics are really, really hard and cold and rush and rough. And, you have to really, really build up relationships. It takes long time. It's not as you go in Bogota and take a taxi and then you have any conversation about, the rain, the traffic, the president. No, here's if you ask, hey, sorry, where the stop is, they will look at you like somebody's talking to me.
Well, that's right. I mean, here we get into arguments or into great debates with taxi drivers, bus drivers, the lady down the street who sells the chicle. We talk all the time about the weather and so on. In fact, when I was back in London, I was doing that, and I was looked at kind of funny by a lot of people. So,
I bet.
This is the great thing that we pick up from Colombia, and this openness, I think. And so it had to have been an experience to adapt to such a different culture. But now you're over there, you've been working in a solidly, I would say it's a topic that is this side of the world where we are. You are an expert on the Amazon. I know your research is Guaviare, Caquetá, Amazonia. And I just thought you could tell us really what's going on. What are you focused on? I know one of the main topics is the arc of deforestation that's taking place. Perhaps you could give us a little bit of an explanation, because I don't know very much about it. I just see photos of fires and I see photos of exploitation and pressure on this vital natural resource. Perhaps you could tell us a bit more, though.
Yes, absolutely. I think it is a really, really important aspect to talk about. I mean, there are so many drivers behind land transformation in the Amazon biome. There has been illegal crops with coca plantations, mining, oil, illegal mining, etc., etc. But very recently, and specifically after 2016, when the peace agreement was signed between the guerrillas, the FARC, and the government, cattle ranching has been one of the main drivers of deforestation. And specifically, as you mentioned, in Guaviare and Caquetá, where mostly of the deforestation is going on, specifically in between three national natural parks, La Tinigua, La Macarena, and Chiribiquete. And Chiribiquete, by excellence, obviously there's an ecological region, but Chiribiquete is the biggest rainforest protected area in the world. It is an amazing hotspot of biodiversity with endemic species, with hydrological systems. It is part of the regulation of climate change, not only the Chiribiquete, but the whole northwestern Amazonia in Colombia. If we look at the biome, then it is connected to the other 9 countries with Amazonian regions. So what I do basically, in very general terms, is how this agricultural expansion, how this cattle ranching is detrimenting all these different ecological connectivity corridors in this hotspot of biodiversity. And not what are the main drivers, because basically we have a history of what has happened and how a lot of colonization frontiers have moved there, including the coca, including the mining, etc., etc. But what I do is, okay, what if we keep on providing or extending this cattle in such a lush and pristine territory? We will have enormous consequences, not only for Colombia, but for the whole Amazonian biome and for the world. It is a climate change regulator. And a lot of the conversations in Colombia are among, okay, they regulate the rains. They have these flying rivers from the food plains of the Amazon up back to the Andes Mountains. And this has, I mean, the relationship between these biomes is the water that cities like Bogota obtain, they are directly attained to the Amazon rainforest. So we have a full complexity of actors, a full complexity of uses of land. And at the same time, we have all the different solutions, because we can see the negative side of it, but there's also so many solutions. And I work with intent attempts to change policymaking, to have a look at, okay, where can we start thinking, not to only see the negative, but also the positive.
Okay, well, I like that way of thinking, because of course we're so exposed to the negative. Because of course it sells, you know, I'm a journalist, it sells. The images of the Amazon burning, or the image of the, you know, a bulldozer going through or something, or the birds, you know, fleeing a forest that's being, you know, knocked down. But as you say, it is all connected. Everything is connected, and these ecosystems, biomes, are so very fragile. So perhaps then, rather than talking about the negative, tell me what the positives are. What positives can we take right now then?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, to understand all the negative things, you have to go and see and how bad it is, and talk to the people, to the stakeholders, to the farmers, etc. The positive thing is that, in my eyes, and what I have experienced, is that there is a very welcoming understanding of value nature, much more than it was maybe 30 years ago. Biodiversity started to be one of the negotiations, one of the conversations that was help for the climate change meetings, etc., etc. But a lot of people have started, I mean, there's some actors that are not obviously on that wheel. We will know some of them, no names, but some others are really much into the, well, how can we avoid that, for example, cattle ranching, or only agricultural expansion, or monocultive in other parts of the Amazon, such as palm oil or things like that, become the one and single economy. There are a lot of initiatives going on. They're just to spread it out. And I think there's such an urgent need to have an Amazonian hub to discuss all these different initiatives where you can include bioeconomy of different resources, you can include natural produce, alternative proteins, cosmetics, ecotourism. You have all these different lines that economies and livelihoods specifically can become to change a little bit of the mindset of, okay, the land is just for, you know, cattle, and I'm a man or I'm a woman that only sells cattle, and this goes on and on and on. So I believe firmly that we have an opportunity now in Colombia, after all that has happened with the new government and with all the buzzing around the deforestation that has been increasingly accelerating and alarming for the last 5-6 years. And that is something that it's becoming, you know, we are in understanding, we are as Colombians interpreting that nature is valuable, that land is not just, you know, people will think a forest is something that it's not for use, then just cut it off. It has to produce. So I think this shift now, which requires a huge paradigm shift, I believe, from government, from civil society, from everyone, it is that finally we can grab the idea of, well, this forest, a standing forest with jaguars, with toucans, with indigenous communities, with farmers from different parts of the country, it can come up to something. It can give us back, and we can protect it, we can conserve it, we can make regenerative systems that along nature can support the systems for production / conservation. This is where the positive picture I stick to, and obviously there's a lot of work to do, and it's fascinating.
But you have to stick to it, otherwise you get up each morning going, oh God. But it's the truth. That's such an interesting thing, is like, if we were able to do a sort of mestizaje of these things, in French you would say like a métissage. I see it like a piece of string that you bind together to make a full piece of string, you know, like you said, the cosmetics, the superfruits or whatever, the ecotourism and everything, and then of course bringing into it food security, of course, you know, which needs to be discussed in this, because that's one of the things that everyone will knock back. Oh yeah, but the country and the land needs to produce, because we're not. And now in this economic disaster that we are living, we need to become self-sufficient. But that doesn't mean bulldozing the Amazon for more palm oil. You know, that means a careful planning of how to do this. So, I mean, you know, this is, I see the positives. But how likely are all of these things going to be taken on board? Because there's so many economic interests. And my fear in Colombia is that there's not enough people with enough power, let's say, to represent the mass, rather than you've got too few people with economic clout who have, you know, obviously an over significant amount to say and decision making. And so we see, well, you know, and as you were saying, we mentioned no names, but the cattle, like that gremio, that union, is so very powerful and political. I don't know how you come up against it, because they are like the chief. Soy opositor. I am the opposition to this current the presidency now of Gustavo Petro. I mean, they are the ones, and we knew this would happen. But let me before we get into that, let's wind back. Is President Santos? So we're looking at 3 presidents ago now, or 2 if you want. He extended Chiribiquete, didn't he? It was him, and then President Duque extended it some more.
I think it was under Santos,
I think it was
2015, 2018. Probably were the 2 years of the expansion.
And then Duque then called like the Gran Reunión de Amazonía or algo así, el Gran Foro, which to me sounded a bit more like a publicity clip for him, but on the surface, it seems like a good idea that they could get the countries together to talk. But is there any result from this? I mean, have we seen anything?
No. I mean, I would say the expansion of the Chiriquete definitely made a huge step in understanding, okay, we in Colombia have almost 46% of the Amazon biome as territory, and we have to take care of it. But then the Duque administration went, and I think it's one of the biggest criticisms that we discussed with other researchers and other different networks here outside Colombia. It was his attempt of the militarized monitoring of deforestation, the Artemisa. So that was sort of like jeopardizing the main advancements or the main results of the Duque's government campaign for, he had this 180,000 millions of trees that were supposed to be planted as Amazonian reforestation belt, but there was a lot of controversy because, I mean, nobody knew which type of species, nobody knew how many, nobody knew where. And it was obviously the whole setting of the institutional infrastructure that is not strong enough. So that's one of the core, I would say, openings of, okay, why is it that it didn't work? They have good ideas, Visión Amazonia, among others, with support of different governments, including Norway, Germany, and the UK was basically behind all these super big locomotora of activation of protecting the Amazon. But then it was all these different approaches, and I would say definitely Duque was campaigning a lot and marketing and publicity, but at the core of the solution there was not big change. And then we saw during his term the highest ever recorded rates of deforestation in the Colombian Amazon. So I think we are entering, and it's not to become, as we started talking, it's not to become to be negative, but now we need to think urgently that these rates of deforestation are going to have enormous consequences. It's not only that we can stop them and change government, and I mean, it doesn't work like that. These are ecosystems, these are living organisms that regulate themselves, and they don't wait for policymakers. They don't wait for decisions to be taken. They just move. So I believe there's a lot of different research, at least from the Brazilian Amazon, where worst case scenarios are we're going to have, a desertification, a savanization. That means total dryness of the biome in, 60 years to come. But I read the other day that we are close to, for the next 15 years, we are close to cross the tipping point. Whereas if we lose 30% of the total Amazon biome, we will be in a very bad situation against climate change globally. And we are today, right now, 5th of September, at 20%. So if we reach a 10% plus, I see, okay, there we should get worried. But obviously there is a lot of different people doing good stuff. And I think, and this is what I have learned from the Nordics, there has to be a trust building process. And I think we are getting into that in Colombia, as you say, how with these powerful actors and, the cattle ranching gremio is very strong. And this is something that, I mean, if they want to become the sustainable cattle productive figure as they promote themselves, they have to deal with the trade-offs that come along with this transition on transformation to be open about the land distribution, land tenure, environmental justice, etc., etc. There's so many layers. But I know many Colombians and many other people that we are working to give this message across with our research, with our campaigning, social societies, just highlighting the importance of not Brazilian Amazon as the one and only, but the whole biome as a living organism that has to be thought. But coming back to your first question, I don't think the whole idea of the Duque government, came up with nothing to go there. So we have a lot of work to do.
I think, like you say, it was a lot of noise. And we must appreciate the publicity given, because that's what it generated.
100%.
But I don't
Yes.
think they went much beyond that. I think it was very much, it burned very bright for a very short amount of time and then went away. And I also think that we were in his 2 years when President Duque was out looking for a new job. And he's always wanted to be the sort of older statesman and an environmental defender type person. So I think this all played into his future. What would you say, CV or resume?
Yes.
I think there was a lot,
sure.
because we do know that he was knocking on doors for about 2 years. So,
there has to be a reason. I mean, it wasn't just because he wanted it.
Yeah, but I think there are, and you raise that point. It's not just the Amazon's not just in Brazil. Yes, a massive amount is not just in Brazil, and it doesn't end at borders. Like you say, they all connect. This is a side note. My dad was Canadian. He used to get really, really annoyed when he was in the US, because when he was watching the weather forecast, it stopped at the border, so he couldn't see what was going on in Canada. But I see that kind of attitude towards the Amazon. Okay, well, that's Colombia, and that's Peru, and that's Bolivia, and that's Venezuela. Now, I got some really fascinating figures this morning from Koika. It's an indigenous, isn't it, unity type of people, a press release, and they say the aim that we should be looking at is to save 80% of what is still here by 2025. Obviously, working with the knowledge of the indigenous people on the ground who know how this. And then there were figures further down, which I found absolutely, terrifying, is that 34% of the Brazilian Amazon is under pressure or at threat. 24% or 24, I think it's 24% of the Bolivian Amazon, 16% of the Ecuadorian, 14% of the Colombian, and 10% of the Peruvian. So 90% of all of that thing is in Brazil and Bolivia. But you can't rule out the others like Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, because it's all together. These figures coming out are just terrifying. And so I want to ask, though, when you are doing all these studies on land transformation, how do you map it? Because you've been down there. How do you actually? Is it with satellites? Are you with drones? What are you doing when you're down in the field?
Yes, that's a really nice question. First of all this, as you said, all this biome is composed, and it's one connected environment in all these countries. But it's also very important to remember that this very specific spot in the world, specifically in what it is Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador, and Peru, is the Guyana Shield. And this Guyana Shield, it is a very, very particular type of environment, and it's very, very interesting in terms of geology, morphology, anthropology. It has so many different components, but at the same time, you come